Welcome to Doctors Unbound, your show devoted to doctors who are, well, unbound by physician stereotypes. Get a behind-the-scenes look at doctors that are breaking the mold and breaking into the worlds of technology, writing, investing, politics, just to name a few. This is Doctors Unbound, where you'll hear from experts with the insights to help you go to the next level. Let's get this show started. Here is your host, Dr. Dave Draginas.
This is episode 13 of Doctors Unbound. You're definitely going to want to stop, collaborate, and listen. Because today we discuss Inception with the white coat investor. We go way back and explore when that idea was planted into his head. Got an idea you're thinking about? I know that I've got a few. Dr. Dahle is really gracious, not only in telling us that story, but he also breaks down a couple key financial topics. Topics like money and relationships, how to control your spending, do doctors need a financial advisor, and how to select the ever so important disability insurance. Here's another great episode with Dr. Jim Dahle. Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Unbound podcast. Today I've got a special guest. His website, White Coat Investor, pioneered the concept of personal finance for doctors online, and he's helped thousands of doctors get their financial house in order and inspired other doctors to enter this niche and create websites of their own. Dr. Dahle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. We are going to start off by getting to know a little bit more about you, the man behind the site. So I know you're an emergency med physician, and maybe morning routines can differ depending on whether you're on a shift or not. But can you take us through what a typical morning routine might look like for you?
Sure. Well, I don't really have a typical routine because I'm an emergency doc.
Right.
I'm still working all the shifts, but the overnight shift now. I just dropped that one about a year ago.
That must be nice.
It is nice, but if I'm going to a shift at 6 a.m., my morning routine consists of rolling out of bed at about 5:30, stuffing some food in my mouth, and getting to work. My eyes open up about the time I get there, it seems sometimes, but that's it for a morning routine on an early shift. If I'm not working an early shift, there's a good chance I'm doing some white coat investor work in the morning, so I get up about 8 and eat breakfast and say goodbye to the kids on their way to school and sit down and sit in front of the computer and work till noon or 1 or 2 and then go mountain biking. And that's kind of a typical day when I don't have a shift.
All right, that's pretty cool. So kind of breaks up the two different types of mornings for you. How about a favorite food or drink? Is there a particular meal that you enjoy?
Well, I share a favorite food with Garfield the cat. I like lasagna.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually what I had today for lunch at the hospital. They don't make a very good lasagna, but it doesn't take much of a lasagna to make me happy.
All right, you're not too picky.
No.
All right, and I think you may have touched on it a little bit in the first question, but maybe a hobby that you like to do when you're not working.
Sure, I like doing anything outdoors, and that's why I like living where I do. I'm only about a mile from Little Cottonwood Canyon, where I go climbing and ice climbing, rock climbing, mountain biking, hiking, you name it. We can pretty much do it all right out of the garage. And so it's pretty easy to get into the mountains from here. The ski resorts are only about 8 miles from the front door, and there's plenty of backcountry skiing, in between here and the resorts. So it's a pretty great place to live.
For somebody who hasn't done too much of that like myself, but might be interested in it, any tips for getting started or for a beginner?
I think you just got to get out there and try it and find out what you like. The problem is a lot of these sports kind of have a high barrier to entry. For example, riding a crummy mountain bike isn't fun. It's not fun to ride a beater mountain bike. And so when the barrier to entry is several $1,000s to get a decent bike, it's not the easiest thing to just go try and see if you like it. I guess you can rent a bike, but that's about it. Same kind of thing with skiing, especially if you don't live anywhere near where you can go skiing. It's a pretty big investment to fly out to Utah or Colorado and, stay in a condo at the side of the hotel, at the side of the resort and rent skis for the whole family. It's kind of an expensive thing if you're not sure you like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess figuring out ways to ease into it and find out if you like it before dropping the big dough on it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now we're going to get into a little bit more about your site. I wanted you to take us back to the moment of inception when White Coat Investor was just a little idea in your head. Can you take us back to when that was, what the circumstances around it were, and how long it took you before you kind of took action and started building the site?
Well, I kind of have to go back a little bit further than that,
Okay.
just to set the background for it. I wasn't really very interested in business or personal finance or investing in college. My major was molecular biology. I was interested in biology, and it turned out I was only interested in biology in as much as it related to medicine. And so by my senior year, pipetting stuff from one test tube to another, I wasn't really interested even in molecular biology. Then went to medical school. Again, no interest in business or finance or investing. And then went away to residency and started getting my first paycheck. And went to a financial advisor at that point, and he helped us start Roth IRAs and get disability insurance and some life insurance. And a few months after that, I picked up my first financial book that I'd ever read. It was Mutual Funds for Dummies by Eric Tyson.
Okay.
And I got into that book and realized that financial advisor isn't giving me very good advice.
Uh-oh.
And so after getting back, kind of confronted him about it and decided to kind of go my own way. And then looking back over my life as I started self-educating on this stuff, this was probably back in 2004, I realized I'd been ripped off a lot of times. Recruiters, realtors, appraisers, lenders, insurance agents, financial advisors, and it kind of made me mad. And it made me mad enough to start learning. I realized if I didn't learn this stuff on my own, nobody was going to teach it to me.
Right.
And so I just dove in. Internet, blogs, forums, books. I lived next to a used bookstore. So even though I was in residency and pretty busy, I'd get over there fairly often and pick up a used book. Read a lot of terrible financial books, but read a few good ones. And then by the time we hit the end of residency in 2006, we kind of had a game plan and we hit the ground running. Even though we weren't getting paid much in the military, we were saving the vast majority of our income and investing it wisely and making wise choices. And I continued to spend some time on internet forums like the Bogleheads forum and blogs. And after a few years, I realized I was doing a lot more teaching than I was learning. And I actually got sick of typing the same thing into the internet over and over and over again. So I decided I'd start a blog. So I could just put a link to those answers that I'd already answered a million times and send people to the link. And that was actually the origin of the White Coat Investor in 2011.
Okay.
Part of it was I'd been asked to work on the wiki at Bogleheads. And I looked at that and I was kind of interested in passive income at the time. And I thought, well, why am I going to do all that work for free when I could be, running my own business? Yeah. So I started as a business right from the beginning. It had ads up the first week, even when nobody was reading it. And so, I had two goals. One was to help doctors get a fair shake on Wall Street, basically help them stop doing dumb stuff with money. And two was actually to learn something about entrepreneurship and how the internet worked and see if I could make a few bucks on the side. The first mission became successful right away. It really grew very quickly. As that information just wasn't available anywhere else. The second mission took a long time to figure out, but obviously, eventually it did, and it's been really fun to kind of play CEO, play businessman in my spare time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking us through that journey there, because, I think there's a lot of doctors out there that might be thinking about, entering a niche or fulfilling a need like that, and I think that's awesome. We're going to move on a little bit here, and I want to ask you a little bit about spending. Doctors, once they finish all their training, it can take a while, but we make a pretty decent income. So it seems like being able to control our spending is something that is, very important for our financial success. Are there any tips for doctors about how to go about controlling their spending?
Well, I think the main tip is you got to realize that income is not wealth. Wealth is your net worth. And so when a doctor comes out of residency, nowadays they typically owe $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. And so since they don't have any assets, their net worth, which is their assets minus their debts, is usually negative, and sometimes terribly negative. Minus 200,000, minus 400,000. They're really the poorest people on earth. So despite that high income, they really need to live like they're much poorer than they actually are. And so I think that is the first mindset change that doctors have to get. The second thing doctors don't realize is they cannot spend their gross income. It's really a relatively small fraction of their income that they can spend. That's because of their large tax burden due to our progressive tax code. It is also due to the fact that once they become an attending physician, they have to start doing a few things that they didn't have to do before. They have to start paying on their student loans is probably the biggest one. Mm-hmm. But by this time, a lot of them already have kids. They have to start saving for college. They're a little bit behind in retirement savings. They're a little bit behind in building home equity. And they've got to catch up to those things. And so the truth of the matter is a doctor can never really spend more than about 50% of his gross income. And the reason for that is about 30% might be going to taxes and 20% has to go to retirement. And so if you get this idea in your head that you come out of residency making $50,000 and you're going to $250,000 and you have this crazy idea that you can spend 5 times as much, you're going to find yourself living paycheck to paycheck on $250,000, which when I tell that to medical students, they just laugh. They think there's no way. There's no way they could have $200,000 and not have enough money. But you know what? I say that to an attending physician. They all nod their head. They know exactly what happened.
Yep.
The doctors just grew into it right after residency. And I think the third thing that works against docs is this societal expectation. We're expected to spend money. People look at us like we're rich, even though we have a negative net worth. And so that's kind of what we do. We expect it of ourselves. Our spouses expect it of us. Our friends and our family, they think we're rich doctors. And they expect us to spend like a rich doctor. And eventually, if you take care of business, you can do that. But right off the bat, that's a good way to stay poor your whole career.
Yeah, thank you for that. I definitely agree with all those points there. Now, these next couple questions here is kind of interesting because I had a friend who's a med student actually recently just asked me about these subjects, and I think it was great in that, you know, a med student who's just finishing up medical school and looking at residency had some questions about disability insurance. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how to evaluate disability insurance, and maybe do it even from the standpoint of somebody who's early in their career, residency or finishing residency, and then entering into being an attending.
Sure. Disability insurance is one of those insurances that almost all of us need. It might even be the most important insurance out there because you're far more likely to be disabled earlier in your career than you are to die.
Right.
And then you are to get sued for millions, than you are to have your house burned to the ground. I mean, all those things do happen, but they're much less likely than disability. So it's really an important insurance, and you really need to buy it as soon as you start making money, even as an intern. They won't sell you that much. They'll only sell you a benefit about $5,000 a month, but you ought to take about as much as they'll sell you as an intern. And that's probably about all you can afford anyway. So that's the time to buy it, is as soon as you start making money. And you want to buy it from an independent agent. That means an agent who can sell you a policy from any company. Because there's 5 or 6 big companies out there that sell true own occupation, specialty-specific disability insurance. And that's the product you're looking for. But the nice thing about going to an independent agent is that person can help you. They can help you learn about the products. They can point out the advantages of one over another. They can point out which one is the best deal for you, given your age, your gender, your state, your specialty, and really your health. And because there is a product that's better for you than all the others. And if you just go straight to the companies, or if you go to a captive agent that only sells for one company, you're going to have to sort that out yourself. If you go to an independent agent, they'll sort it out for you because they're going to get about the same commission either way. And that commission's a lot. They get paid very well to sell disability insurance. So don't feel bad taking advantage, just peppering them with questions until you understand absolutely everything about the policy. Because disability is like 50 shades of gray, right? Life insurance is black and white. You're either alive or you're dead. I mean, I'm an emergency doc. I see all the shades between life and death. It lasts about 15 minutes, and then it's very obvious which one you are. But disability is not like that. There's a lot of different shades there. And so that's why disability insurance contracts are so complicated and why you need to understand them. But you got to realize this stuff's expensive. The first time you go to buy it, you're going to get some sticker shock. Because buying an individual policy, the type of policy that goes with you as you change jobs, which has the strongest definition of disability, which is what you want, is pretty expensive stuff. You're basically paying 2 to 6% of what the benefit is. So if your benefit's $10,000 a month, you're paying $200 to $600 a month to get that benefit. And so that obviously adds up over the course of a year. The younger you are and the healthier you are when you buy it, and the more male you are, it turns out the cheaper it is. But if you wait a while to buy it, it just gets more and more expensive. And sometimes if you develop some health problems or some dangerous hobbies, they don't sell it to you for a very good price at all. And then you're really stuck looking around for a group policy from an employer or a professional association. But you generally want to buy it with a strong definition of disability, and you want to make sure you have some specific riders in there, which is like additions that on the policy.
Uh-huh.
They come with like an extra fee. And one of the most important ones is what's called a residual disability rider. And what that basically protects you from is a partial disability. So you either become partially disabled, or when you're coming back from a full disability, it continues to give you some income until you can ramp up your work. And that's a really important rider. If you're early on in your career, there's a couple other riders that are probably worth purchasing. The first one is a cost of living rider. So once the disability benefit kicks in, every year it's increased with insurance. And so that's a really important rider to get. But the other one that's worthwhile, particularly if you buy it in residency, is what's called a future purchase option rider. And that basically allows you to buy more disability insurance at the end of residency, even if you develop a health problem in residency. So without having to answer any more medical questions or get any more blood drawn or have your vitals taken again, you can just buy more insurance. And that's really a good idea if you're a resident. You can't afford as much as you'll need the rest of your life. But once you're an attending, you really only have to shop for this stuff once. You don't have to shop for it every 2 years or anything. Once you're an attending, just buy as much as you need, and then you're probably done. You probably never have to shop for it again. And once you're financially independent, hopefully at some point in your 50s, you can just cancel it and save those premiums.
Cool. Thank you for that and for all those different writers. One aspect that was a little bit different for me, because I was military, and I know you were military as well, is when I was going through, I had very limited options, and it seemed like they were decreasing every year. Do you know if that's still the case for our military doctors out there? Is it still pretty tough for them to get disability insurance?
Yeah, it's still very limited. There's one or two companies that will sell it to you. Most of the time it comes with an exclusion if you're injured due to an act of war. But the truth is, very few doctors are actually injured due to an act of war. They're much more likely to get in a car wreck on the way to the hospital here in the States than they are to get injured overseas. So it's probably still worth buying in that case. Plus, you get a little bit of disability through the military. And there's always Social Security disability as well. But it's definitely easier to buy as a civilian than it is as a military doc. So if you know you're going to be going in, buy your policy before you go in.
Right. Cool. Moving on to another question here, and again, this was one of the two questions that I got from this young physician to be, and it had to do with financial advisors and how to pick a financial advisor, and maybe even if physicians need one. So maybe if you can tackle that for us.
Well, the truth of the matter is that physicians don't absolutely need one. If they can, dig up enough interest in this subject to develop the knowledge and the discipline that they need to be successful as their own financial planner and as their own investment manager, they can do this themselves. But I would estimate that's probably only about 20% of docs that are willing to do that, which is too bad because financial advice is very expensive stuff. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, you're paying your financial advisor at a higher hourly rate than you're earning as a physician. And so you got to realize that if you choose to outsource this, it's going to cost you some money. Even a good price for financial advice is a 4-figure amount. It might be $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 a year. And that's a deal because there's docs out there paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year for financial advice. And over the course of your career, that can add up to millions. And so it's really a very profitable hobby. If you can find yourself to be interested at all in it, enough to follow a good blog, enough to read a few good books, it's really a great hobby. But if you want to go hire a financial advisor, I don't think that's crazy. There's nothing that says you got to keep them your whole career. You can just use them periodically to check in, or you can use them for a few years until you're comfortable doing it on your own, or you can just, use them your whole career. Just realize there's a price to pay for that. But the key is to find somebody that offers good advice at a fair price. And what I mean by that is you want somebody that's not only charging basically a 4-figure amount per year, but somebody that's not selling you products. You want a fee-only advisor. That way they're doing the right thing for you. They're willing to sign a fiduciary statement, meaning they will act as your representatives and do what's right for you. And then you want somebody with some experience, preferably, a designation like a CFP, a certified financial planner. It doesn't take that many hours to get that. It's about 200 hours of studying, which seems kind of silly when you compare it to the 10,000 hours you do in residency. But it's still better than nothing. And there's a lot of people out there calling themselves financial advisors that haven't even bothered getting that.
Wow.
You also want somebody that has been doing it for a little while. A little bit of gray hair is a good thing. This might not be the time to hire the 22-year-old kid. You really want someone that has helped clients through a bear market. And these days, that means they've been doing it at least 9 years, because our last bear market was really in 2008. And so a little bit of experience goes a long way as well. But you also want somebody that keeps up with the academic literature about investing. I mean, there actually is some evidence showing what works best. And so you want somebody that keeps up with that and favors a passive investing approach rather than trying to time the market or pick stocks, that sort of thing for you. Because there's plenty of people out there that will do that, and it's really not worth paying for bad advice.
Cool. And now the next question here has to do with money and relationships, because being married a little over 10 years now, I've realized that money and taking care of finances is definitely a team game. So any tips for those that are married or in a relationship out there, how to broach the subject of money with their spouse or significant other?
Well, I think you just nailed it where you said it was a team game.
Right.
I read a forum post today. This was on the Boglehes forum. And it was a guy coming asking for advice for his friends. His friends were a couple in their 60s, and she had been the main breadwinner their entire career. He'd been kind of trying to run a business on the side, but never really made much money on it. She always assumed it was at least covering its costs, though. And here they are in their mid-60s, and she just realized that he owes $200,000 in credit cards that he's been racking up over decades.
Wow.
to pay for his business losses. And, they've been married 30 years and just realizing now that they're carrying around $200,000 in high interest rate debt. That's what happens when you're not working together. And I think one of my readers said, you don't necessarily have to be on the same page, but you better be reading the same book. And I think that's a good description. You just got to talk about this stuff from time to time. And it's amazing. If you will talk about it every month, once a month for the first couple of years of your marriage, you'll never fight about money, which is pretty amazing considering it's one of the top 2 or 3 reasons people get divorced. And so just sit down for a few minutes once a month, talk about your spending and your goals, and make sure that your spending is aligned with your values, meaning you're spending on the stuff that will make you happiest, and work with it from there. And realize that if one of you is a saver and the other is a spender, you're both going to have to compromise a little bit, but that's good for both of you. The spender needs to be reined in, and the saver needs to quit being such a tightwad. You need to save enough, but you don't have to save 80% of your income. You just don't need that much savings. And so it's good to pick a number, and the number I usually recommend for physicians is about 20% of gross income for retirement. But once you get there, you don't have to go crazy driving each other nuts, reusing paper towels and washing out your Ziploc bags, trying to save even more. You've got a physician income. If you'll just harness it to build wealth, you don't have to do the really hard stuff that a lot of people out there have to do because of their lower incomes.
Well, thank you for that, because I think that communication, like you said, it will not only be great for your bank account, but will be great for your marriage too, and hopefully, keep that going.
Well, for sure. And it's not like the two aren't tied together, right? I mean, the worst thing you can do for your finances is to get divorced. So one house, one spouse.
There you go. And now moving on to kind of, the white coat investor and the white coat empire. What can we expect from you and the site here in the coming year?
Well, one of the projects I'm most excited about is a course I'm working on. I'm actually spending just about every waking moment I have these days working on this online course. It's going to be a lot of fun. And my goal for that is not necessarily to get everybody that comes to my website to buy it. It's written for a very specific person, the kind of person that wants to be a do-it-yourself investor, but just feels like they're financially illiterate. They don't want to pay thousands of dollars to a financial advisor, but they know they don't quite know enough yet to be their own financial planner. So in this course, which I think is going to be about 6 hours of video that you can do anytime, anywhere, I'll take you from the beginning, teach you financial literacy, and help you get a written financial plan. So by the time you get done with this course, you've got a plan that you can follow to success. So I'm pretty excited about that. But we have lots of other stuff that's going to be going on through the rest of this year and all of next year. We're getting pretty excited about the podcast. We've had a lot of success with that this year.
Very cool.
And trying to reach out into some other things, probably another book by early next year, and doing some more video stuff on YouTube. Now that we've got this setup that we bought for the online course, we're pretty set up to make videos now. We got to take advantage.
You are going to be very, very busy.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be okay. This year, I kind of thought I was going to cut back, but I actually ended up working harder than I think I ever have since residency this year. So hopefully I can find a little bit better balance next year. But, it's hard when you're so excited about all this stuff you have going and all these people you can reach and really get this message of financial literacy out to.
Well, that's what I was going to say is when you're enjoying it and when you can see the benefits and the impact that you're having on people, I think that's awesome. I'm starting to get people to, email and contact me about the way the podcast has impacted them. I'm sure on a much smaller scale than what you deal with, but it does motivate you to keep going and to keep building. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's what they say about entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs are the only people who work an 80-hour work week to avoid working for somebody else for 40.
That's right. All right. The next question here is a little bit more geared maybe towards the audience a little bit. So what is the one thing or action that you would like the listeners to take after listening to the podcast today?
Well, I'd like them to just do one thing. Don't try to do everything at once. Just do one thing right away to fix up your finances. If you don't have disability insurance, go get disability insurance. If you don't know how much of your income you're saving, go calculate how much of your income you're saving. Just take how much you saved this year and divide it by your gross income. And just the simple act of doing that and doing it maybe once a year will cause you to save more and to reflect on whether you're really spending your money the way you want to. But if I had one piece of advice to give a young doc, especially if I can catch them before they come out of residency, I give them 4 words. Live like a resident. And that is really the key to physician wealth. The key is to build all the wealth before you realize you have a physician income. Because if you can just keep your lifestyle exactly where it is as a resident, or even give yourself a 50% raise, right? That would be huge in corporate America. But take the difference between that and your attending income, use it to pay off all your loans, save up a down payment on your dream house, and catch up on your retirement savings to your college roommates. It would go a long way toward you becoming wealthy and being able to make decisions the rest of your life without having to think about the finances of them. All of a sudden, now you're free to do what you want to do, and you're free to, focus on your family, focus on your practice, focus on what matters most to you, rather than having to do something for money.
Very cool. How about one thing that you wish maybe went differently in your career?
Well, like a lot of docs, I made plenty of financial mistakes. I bought loaded mutual funds. I owned a whole life policy at one point. I probably came out behind financially by joining the military. Now, the further I get away from that experience, the more I appreciate having served and having given something back to my country.
For sure.
But there's no doubt that I came out behind financially by doing that. I went to super cheap medical school and could have come out with loans at sub 1% that I could have paid off in 6 months, So I don't know that I would have changed that. I suppose in retrospect I may have, but I wouldn't count that as a huge mistake. There were certainly lots of positives I had from going into the military. I think probably the biggest thing I would not do that I did is we bought a house both in medical school and during our time in the military. And it just didn't make sense. It's weird. As medical students and residents, and particularly our spouses, we get this burning desire to buy a house. We feel like that will have made it, is necessary to be financially successful. And the truth of the matter is, you shouldn't be buying a house until you're in a stable place professionally and a stable place personally. And then it's a blessing in your life. Up until then, it's a curse. And too many people just don't do the math and realize the likelihood of them coming out ahead, owning a house only for 2 or 3 years, even 4 years, is pretty low. And so I don't think I would have bought a house until, I was into my, partnership emergency medicine job here if I had it all to do over again.
Well, I think that's great insight there, making sure that you're stable both personally and professionally, because things can happen so quickly where those things change, and now all of a sudden you need to move areas, and that house is going to be tough to deal with. You're even going to have to try and rent it or sell it, and when you when you no longer have that leverage when you have to move quickly.
Right, and don't think the hospital CEO doesn't know that while you're negotiating your contract.
Oh, for sure. Now, the White Coat Investor is obviously a very comprehensive resource, but is there another resource out there that you might recommend to our audience, something that you find very useful?
Well, it really depends on what you like. And I find these days more and more people like podcasts because they can listen to it on their commute. They can listen to it while they're exercising. They're far more likely to listen to the whole podcast than they are to read an entire blog post. And so I see a lot of podcasts like yours that are coming along and that doctors can really latch on to. And this is a whole different group of doctors than will read financial blogs. And so I've gotten more and more into listening to these podcasts, both the physician-specific ones as well as, the ones that are just kind of general economics or general investing. I think that's a great resource. But I still think it's important to read some financial books. I know it's painful, but force yourself to read a financial book once a year. And I've got a great list of recommended books on my website under the recommendations tab. And the truth of the matter is you can get, a more comprehensive look at something out of a book than you can just from skimming the internet or, reading a blog post. And all the most important information is not time sensitive. It's evergreen. And so get into the books, get into the library, get some stuff on your Kindle and slog through it on one of your vacations this year. And you'll be surprised how valuable that first good financial book you read is. It may be worth millions of dollars to you over the course of your career.
For sure. I definitely agree with that. And now we'll end with a little whimsical question. Is there a place that you would like to fly and go visit if, there weren't any commitments or any financial resource limitations?
That's a great way to phrase the question, because the limitation for us these days is our kids. It's not money.
I'm right there with you.
and it's probably not even work. I could probably stack shifts in a way now that I could get away for a 3-week trip. What I'd really like to do, I'd like to go to Bhutan.
Okay.
And just the people who've been there and the stories they tell just sounds like a fascinating place to go visit. So I'd like to go check that out. But I think I'm probably still a few years away from being able to free ourselves up for as long as a trip like that would take.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Our kids are awesome, but they are very young. And getting away even for a trip halfway across the country is quite a production these days. But it'll get better.
Yeah, for sure. And it's fun to take them on trips as they get older, too. We took the whole family to Japan this year.
Oh, wow. That sounds awesome.
That was quite an adventure, and it's funny. No matter where you take them, all they care about is where's the hotel pool.
I can see that. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with us. I think we all learned a ton from your wealth of knowledge on personal finance for physicians. And is there any last words or resources? I mean, obviously, White Coat Investor, but any last words for the audience?
Sure. I think the main thing I'd tell them is just keep doing what you're doing here. You're listening to this podcast because you want to learn more. Keep doing that. And as you find yourself moving through your career, keep that curiosity of learning alive and continue to learn about stuff, because there's a whole wide world out there that you missed while you were in medical school or residency or dental school or whatever. So get out there and start learning some of that stuff, and it really helps energize and rejuvenates your career.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jim Dahle, White Coat Investor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Doctors Unbound podcast. Remember to head over to doctorsunbound.com to access all the show notes and resources discussed in this episode. Now, it's your turn to be unbound.